Good evening, everyone. This is Steve, KI5JUF. Hope everyone's having a good evening out there, 4th of July and so forth. Uh, I've got a video tonight I've put together. It's kind of a research video, or at least starting a discussion about something that kind of piqued my curiosity. Saturday, I attended a races meeting here with the WTX region here in West Texas of the ARRL. And it was a very good meeting, enjoyed it, and there was a lot of things that got me thinking about preparedness. Being a new ham for roughly a year now, preparedness or doing races or areas events had not really come across my mind or even thought about it. But this meeting was very informative, and it kind of got me thinking. If an emergency happens, if we lose power, if we have a tornado, if we have a medical emergency, some type of situation that occurs, um, preparedness is a big thing. And I'll be honest with you, if something were to go wrong tomorrow, um, I probably it's going to be real tough because there's just a lot of variables out there. And I think one of the important things is in an emergency situation is tornado, whatever extremely cold temperatures is, the loss of powers, number one, if you lose your repeaters, and so forth. So a lot of the ham guys that were in the meeting or the concept is, at least with the club, is they have what's called a emergency to go kit. So we discussed the to go kit per se, and this has radios and things. And some of the things we discovered were being able to operate the radios. There's many different radios, many different menu functions and configurations and so forth. So we kind of figured out, well, maybe we need to do some training, preparedness, checklist, PMs and so forth, maintenance and stuff on the equipment. But what kind of came home to me was I thought, you know what, we have an E2000i generator here, and we don't know a whole lot about it. So I thought, well, you know what, this would be a good opportunity to talk about the generator, the usefulness of it, what are the limitations of it, what you could do with the generator, with the ham radio and so forth. So just real quick, some real quick bullet points here. The average runtime on the generator can be 3.2 to 8.1 hours, depending on what kind of load you have. It does have a feature called an Eco Throttle Assist, which you can actually engage, which will uh, reduce the fuel consumption when there's not transmitting or power consumption. The generator uses gasoline octane 86 and of course has 10W S30. So it's you don't have to mix special gases, or you don't have to make two cycle mixes and things that can go bad, and so forth. But one of the things that's important with a generator is, and we'll do another video, we're going to actually power the generator on and check the oil and check make sure that everything is okay oil wise and of course fuel wise. So again, it's all about preventive maintenance. When you're going through, you got to keep this stuff running. So what I learned today, and I'll share this with you, it does have a DC output, but this DC output is strictly for charging batteries, and particularly car batteries or truck batteries, or particularly if they go into a low, deep discharge state. Because if a battery goes extremely low, like below 6 volts or 7 volts, we learned that some of these chargers that you buy, like at Walmart and so forth, if it's that low, they're not going to be able to kick in and bring it up to any substantial amount of current. And at that point, what you would have to do is actually connect the generator directly to the battery. Changing the oil, of course, checking the oil is some of the things that you want to do on it. Refueling, starting the engine. One of the things I want to talk about here real quick is carbon monoxide poisoning. Carbon monoxide poisoning, you absolutely do not want to run a generator in an enclosed area, for example, a garage with the door closed, or in a living room, or in a kitchen, or wherever. You always want to make sure they're fully outside, completely uh, in the open air where they can, uh, none of the toxic gases from the exhaust can get into your apartment, home, or garage, or whatever. You absolutely want to make sure that's critical. So the generator actually has two modes of operation. One is called a 30-minute surge mode, which can provide up to 2,000 watts of power, or roughly 16.6 amps. Then it has a continuous mode, which can continually provide about 1,600 watts at 13.3 amps. So the power supply I use with the actual power supply that I have on my bench here in my station, it's a PowerWorks. It is a 30 amp power supply. Now the 30 amp power supply is for surges but it's not continuous service. It's if you have if you're transmitting a lot of extra power and then you're reducing your power in future transmissions and so forth, it's not continuous. What I did is on my calculations, I said, well, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and pick the 30 amps, which is the highest potential load or the duty cycle that power supply could see. And what I did was, to do this, you simply take the voltage, 14.1 times 30, and that gives us 423 watts. So what we have to do is we have to convert that watts over to AC amps. And then we can actually start establishing a relationship of how many power supplies can we put on a generator. So you see in this example here, the power supply actually has a total capacity of 13.3 amps. Let's see. Yeah, 13.3 amps right here. One of these power supplies, fully loaded at 100% duty cycle, has a AC amperage current draw of 3.525. But again, this generator can put out a total of 13 amps. So let's talk about radios and power supplies and what kind of relationship they have. If you wanted to run an FTM300D at 50 watts, this runs typically about 12 amps DC at about 13.8 volts, which is 165 watts. So what we would have to do is we would have to take that 165 watts and we would convert that to 1.3 divided by 120 volts AC, and that would give us 1.375 AC amps. And again, the full power supply is rated for 3.52 amps. So this particular situation here is we're only running this power supply at about 39% of the duty cycle, or the total capacity of the power supply, because the total capacity is 423 watts, but we're only pulling 165 watts. Now in the alternating current, or on the generator side, that's roughly about 1.375 amps or 165 watts AC. And of course you can see, the generator, this is what the power supply is rated, but the actual generator is rated for almost 1600, 1600 watts. So this is not a problem here at all. The other radio that we'll talk about is the Ft991A. This radio here has 13.8 volts at roughly 23 amps maximum power, which is 317 watts. So what we would do here is take 317 and divide it by 120, which gives us roughly about 2.641 AC amps on the generator, which is roughly about 75% of the duty cycle. So let's talk about what could the generator run. Now in this example, we've already established that each one of these power supplies, when they're at 100% of duty cycle, they roughly pull about 423 watts at 3.525 AC amps. So in this example, we could technically run 3 of these power supplies at full 100% duty cycle with no problem. All 3 of these together produce roughly about 11 amps. So we're still about 2 amps under the maximum power capacity of this generator. Now let's just change for a little bit. Let's say, for example, we wanted to put a coffee maker in there because it's early in the morning, we want coffee. Well, we'd have to lose one of those power supplies. But if we did, most coffee makers pull roughly about 650 watts, which is of course equivalent to 5.41 watts AC. And then we have our 2 power supplies. Now in this example here, we're still good. We've got the green check box. We got 3.525 times 2, which is 7.05 amps. And then we got the coffee maker, which pulls about 5.41 amps, and that comes to about 12.46 amps, which is less than the 13.3 that the generator's able to produce. This situation here, this is a little closer, but it's still within tolerance. We've got a coffee maker and a generator. So here we could actually run both at 11, almost 12 AC amps, and that's still less than the 13.3 amps that the power supply is rated for. Now this situation here is not going to work. We've got two refrigerators, and at running at 100% duty cycle, which is assuming that both compressors would be running on the refrigerators, we're too close here. We're at 13.0 AC amps and we're at 13.3. And in this situation here, I wouldn't recommend it because you could really put a heavy load, and that generator will be running at almost 100% capacity, which means your fuel time could be, 3 hours. But not to say you're running the generator at almost 100% of duty cycle. So that's probably not a good plan. The last thing we'll talk about is lithium batteries. The to-go kits are something I'm still investigating. What I've done is, what I've talked when I was at the club meeting is I said I'd like to look at some of the to-go kits, take some pictures, learn what the guys are actually doing, what kind of batteries and so forth are they using, what kind of charging stations are they using, and things like that. So keep in mind the to-go kit is primarily something you would, like a backpack, you would throw on your back, and you would actually, if you're deployed, they might say, hey, KI5JUF, I need you to go to this intersection and this quarter, and I need you to watch for any emergency traffic coming through. And my responsibility would be I would need to have my to-go kit ready to go, battery fully charged. I should be able to dispatch to the location, with my vehicle, get set up, get on the air, and do all of this independent of all the other operations going on. So when I check in with the command center, I would check in and say, this is KI5JUF. We're at this intersection. We're monitoring. We'll be listening for orders and so forth. So you kind of need to be able to have this all ready to go, and they don't really need to babysit you, or you just need to get there, get your equipment on the air, get on the right frequency, check in with the command center, and then of course log anything, any special information. But this slide here, what I wanted to talk about is most of the to-go kits will have battery packs and chargers and radios and things, and of course antennas. One of the things you should familiarize yourself with is the terminology. I came across this company here, Dakota Lithium batteries, and these batteries are very high capacity. And for example, they can provide 12 volts at 10 amp hours and 12 volts at 18 amp hours. And what that means to you as the user is this battery fully charged, you could transmit full power 10 amps for roughly 45 watts FM for up to an hour, or you could go down to 25 watts and transmit for 2 hours, and of course you could go down to 15 watts and talk for 5 hours. So it's directly proportional. The second battery they have is an 18 amps. Now, if you're talking 100 watts, you could definitely go a long period of time. But if you were talking, say, only 50 watts, you could probably talk 3 hours and so forth. So just some terminology, some things to become familiar with. But they're called to-go kits. And the purpose of these are, if you're in the RACES group, is if there is an emergency in your dispatch, you need to be able to grab this thing, get on the air, um, get everything done independent of anyone else helping you, get on the frequency. If the repeater's down, you need to go to the backup simplex channel or backup repeater and so forth. So that's pretty much, just like I said, it's just an introduction. Of course, the last thing is if you want to take your power supply and figure out how many AC amps it pulls, which is directly relation to the wattage of that AC, you could actually take your voltage and times 30 amps, which is what we used in this example. And then of course that gives us roughly 423 watts. We take that and divide it by 120. And then of course this gives us the AC amps. And of course the Honda generator has a steady 1600 watts power with a total capacity of 13.3 amps. So with those pieces of the puzzle, you should be able to put it all together. So this is KI5JUF. Have a good evening and 4th of July, and thanks again for watching, and hope you enjoy the video.